Everybody's attention, we're going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the August 28th, 2024 Agenda Review Committee meeting. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rowling,
Here?
Ms. Casabon, Mr. Phillips, Ms. Tanner, Mr. Impastato, Ms. O'Brien, Mr. Corbin.
Thank
We have
you.
a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Remember that only members of the Agenda Review Committee can make a motion, a second, or a vote at this meeting today. Also, we are going to review the Parish Council agenda for the regular meeting on September 5th, 2024. The meeting agenda is always available in the council office and also on the website, so keep that in mind. Okay, now we are going to go ahead and go through. These items are currently have been pulled already. Under ordinances of introduction, we have ordinance calendar number 7691, ordinance calendar number 7692, ordinance calendar number 7693, ordinance calendar number 7694, ordinance calendar number 7695, ordinance calendar number 7696, and ordinance calendar number 7697.
We have a card for this
21. Okay, that's further in, right?
No, you didn't take that one. We have a card. You just said someone from the public wants to pull that.
And then also, someone from the public wants to pull ordinance number 7621 AA. Okay, thank you.
He's coming to you.
What's that?
He's coming to you. He's going to ask you.
Yeah. Okay, at this time, is there anyone from the committee or the council that would like another item pulled? Yes, sir?
Under resolutions, please pull C 6996. That's about the annexation and slide out.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, administration, anything? Thank you. Okay, now I do need a motion to refer the remainder of the agenda, minus the items that have been pulled, to the full council. I need a motion, please. I need a second. That is item number, you want finance too? The other two? Okay. 7621AA, and also resolution C6996.
And we have another one. It's a resolution.
And then finance, but also we just got another card. It's resolution number 7003. So that's the three. So before, I think we had a motion, we had a second, and then all in favor, just committee members? Yay or nay?
Yay.
And then any nays? Okay, good, thank you. Then I need a motion and a second to refer ordinances of introduction number 18 through 24 to the Finance Committee for discussion. I need a motion, please. I need a second. All in favor? Opposed? Right, thank you. All right. Hold on one second. At this time, is Ross in the room here somewhere? There you are. If you don't mind coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about appeals at this point, and then we'll go to each item that have been pulled after.
I'm here to answer questions.
So at this time, where's Mary? She's not in here. Okay, she's on the phone. Okay, and that's fine. So my understanding, we were going to go through each appeal item for any type of discussion. So Ross is at the podium.
Bruce Cox and David Carisco, minor subdivision.
So I think you would just kind of give us an overview on those.
So no specific questions?
I think at this time, we don't have a question, but I think we're going to do an overview. Is that correct? Ashley?
Well, I was not made aware of providing an overview today, so what I can tell you is the appeal number one. I'm good. Yeah. So appeal number one is Bruce Cox appealing the denial of a zoning change at his property at Highway 59 and Sharp Road. This piece of property has had a lot of community interest, let's say, a lot of opposition. This piece of property has been tried to be rezoned at least a minimum of 4 to 5 times over the past 10 or 15 years, always met with opposition. The request was, I believe, for HC3, if I'm not mistaken, HC2. It was then requested at the podium to be a lesser intensification zoning of NC. From there, still was denied and has made it to the council level for an appeal. The appeal then was heard by the council, and at that time was postponed due to the fact of some discrepancies by the opposition and from the applicant and property owner himself. So here we are on round 2 of the appeal. So I'm looking for the particular council member for that district there you are. So I guess where do you want to go from here?
Well, I guess he's going to present more information. He was going to present more information. Then, from what I understand, there was questions that were given to planning, and
So the only question that I believe was asked of planning was, of these lots of record, if they don't meet the minimum square footage for that zoning classification, how can it be rezoned? Well, typically that's been the practice when you have lots of record. Once, it's like a chicken and an egg thing. So what happens is they come in for a zoning change. If it gets to zoning, then we make them combine those lots. They can't pull permits. They can't apply for anything until they meet the minimum square footage requirements, which would then take place after the zoning change is approved by the council. And then we'd have them subdivide those into the one parcel that would then meet the minimum requirements. So right now, he's applying for it. He does not meet the minimum lot requirements, but that's because there are lots of record.
so he's still applying for HC2.
I have not heard of. I thought he was going for an NC, but I could have heard that incorrectly.
Right, and at the last meeting, we heard NC4, if I remember right.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the applicant did say he would, and it's up to the applicant to ask. But does anybody recall him asking? Anybody? It was discussed. Okay, gotcha, but not necessarily an ask. Gotcha.
So with the 5 lots, it would take all 5 lots
You'd have to combine all of them. Yes.
to be legal in what or what zoning capacity?
For either of them, for all of them.
HC,
So whether it's NC or HC, he would then meet the minimum requirements.
but he would meet it for HC2 if
Yes.
he had all the lots combined.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Sorry.
Ross, in your analysis of the history of this, I guess, applicant, is he just trying every single combination to get something through here, or does he keeps trying to do the same thing, turning these residential parcels commercial?
You know, I don't want to speak to the intent of what he's thinking and why he's doing this. I can tell you what I think the appropriate zoning is for that location,
That would
but
be
I'm not
great.
going to try and, get into his mind on
Right.
why he's doing it.
Because it is an unfortunate parcel, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think NC zoning would be appropriate for that area. It should not be residential for somebody living on a roundabout. That does not make any sense in my mind. And highway commercial is too intense. So, like in law office, a dentist, doctor, whatever, CPA, just seems to make sense for that area. It's a
And
low
then-
intensity. It's a.
For my follow-up to that, so if we go NC and take your recommendation, would we have to combine all those lots eventually to make it?
He would have to do that before he could pull any building permits or anything. And he couldn't sell those individual lots. I mean, he could, but whoever bought them would have serious trouble and whatever. But yeah, to do anything moving forward, those would have to be combined to pull any kind of permits. It's such an odd lot and configuration. He's going to have setback problems. He's going to have a very minimal building envelope for that location.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate your expertise.
Mr. Kugel?
I'm waiting for
Oh, Mr. Corbin?
So it was a Ross in the previous meeting. One of the other things that was talked about was that the lots were encumbered by the by the neighborhood, the subdivision, has that been eliminated or released?
Yeah, we don't find that in our analysis.
So you don't find that they are encumbered?
No.
Okay, so, all right, thank you very much.
Councilman Phillips.
Councilman Phillips?
I was waiting to get on her. Oh, I forget my question now. Jeez, I'm in.
If it comes back to you, I'm here all
Oh,
day.
the NC, you said there's a NC that you think that he would be applicable, but there's only 2 NC configurations now, right?
NC1.
NC1. Okay, thank you.
Hey, I am so sorry. I thought 100%, I would have bet my life that I told you that you
No,
were
it's
doing
okay.
this.
No, it's
I'm
fine.
so sorry.
Luckily,
It was
this
my
is.
fault. He didn't know.
I mean, luckily, I do this every day, so it's not too big of a jump to talk about it.
Thank you for that.
Thought I cleared that.
Okay, thank you. All right, the second one, who, Mr. Kugel?
Yes, Ross. So my understanding, I've talked to Mr. Carrasco. I believe this is 2 of his children own this property, and it's basically a bunch of property adjoining that is owned by a family. I didn't really see, unless I'm missing something, the reason for the denial, and I understand it was somewhat not contentious, but it was split.
Yeah.
If you could just explain.
So I wouldn't call it contentious either. They had a good discussion. So, and the discussion was over the shape of the parcel that was being developed, and it meets all minimum requirements. It is an odd shape. It may pose building, issues later on down the line should he want to do that. But because it's common ownership, it's family land, it's brothers and sisters and things like that. If they need to or want to change the lot configuration later at a future date to accommodate building, then that's fine. That's totally up to them. I think it actually protects the surrounding area by having that parcel that's being just left out or kind of made into that particular shape, almost like unbuildable or very difficult to build on. So it does. It's not like it's going to pose any more density or anything like that.
And he understands from my conversations with him, I'm not going to be able to build certain things there, but that they're fine with that. So
That's correct. And then it would cost them, many more thousands of dollars to have it resurveyed.
Right.
And for this point in time, it probably doesn't make any sense to do that. When he
Right.
wants to come back in years or whenever it may be, in months, and reconfigure it, he'll come back to the commission, ask for a new subdivision of property. It's not a subdivision, so I just want to point that out. He'll have to go back to the commission, and they'll reevaluate it again. But I think moving forward right now, it's fine.
okay.
Anyone else? Good, thank you, sir. We appreciate you. Okay, we're going to move on.
Can I just-
I'm sorry. Come on.
I just want to point out too that if you were to override the planning commission's approval or denial of that case, there was also a waiver that was requested, so the motion would have to be with approval of that waiver as well.
So just the procedure is when we request the override, it needs to be specified with the waiver.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on. Another item that was pulled was ordinance item number 7621AA. So if Mr. Pillsbury, is it Pillsbury in the house? Okay, yes, sir. You want to come up? Sir, and that's 3 minutes. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right, good afternoon, council. So there's multiple different things I printed out from the state government, from the tax assessor office, from something called the Louisiana Legislative Auditor, and it all describes what happens in reassessment years. And the law states that taxes are supposed to remain revenue neutral, and it says it across all these publications. Clearly, that didn't happen this year, and I'm trying to get an understanding why. I've been to meetings with the tax assessor, and the tax assessor said, my job and responsibility is to come up with the assessments. It's all these taxing bodies that set their own millage rates. That's why it's higher. Been to other meetings where they say, well, that's kind of true. some did roll back, but those taxing agencies have the authority to roll forward, which kind of makes it more expensive. I talked to someone that is a board member of one of these organizations and said neither one of those is true. What happens is prior to our approving our budget, we are given from the tax assessor the adjusted millage that we are to apply to remain revenue neutral for our budget. We voted on that, we passed that. After it was passed, that's when we find out what the actual millage is, and that's why we're seeing these huge increases. And people are coming to us asking, why are you increasing the taxes? We're not increasing the taxes. We didn't come up with the millages were provided to us by the tax assessor. So they're passing these budgets based on an assessment or a millage rate that was given to them, but the tax assessor office is saying, no, we don't do that. They set their own millages. So I'm looking for clarification on what that process is, because I still don't understand. So clarification, what that process is, why it failed, because if we look, I mean, this is devastating to our community. On top of, we all know what home insurance is doing, we all know what inflation is doing. I'm in the same business as Councilman Burke. I have people that bought houses this year, they're expecting what my tax will be next year, budgeting on that, and now they're going to get hit with $1,000, $1,500 increase in their property taxes that they're not expecting. And then the third question is, how is this permitted since it's in direct opposition to the law, which says we are to remain revenue neutral in an assessment year? Because again, clearly that's not happening.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. You're more than welcome to stay up there if you haven't anything additional, but we're going to turn this over to legal at this point.
Sure, so I will try my best to address your
Turn
questions.
her off. Press it again.
Oh, my apologies.
But these are really answers that the tax assessor needs to provide to you. In terms of parish government only sets the millage rates for parish alimony that's collected from the parish as a whole, and as well as the municipalities, the drainage maintenance millage, the animal service millage, the library, the Council on Aging Stark, the coroner's office, and the lighting district number 6. So those are the only ones that this body can actually set the adjusted millage rate for. As far as how that number comes to be in terms of reassessments of properties, that's where you need to get the information from the assessor. It's kind of a moving target because even those assessments are not set in stone yet. The rolls are open now for people to go and view what their reassessment value is for this year. And the assessor is setting up meetings with people that would like to challenge their assessment, and those numbers may change. And then after that period of time, anyone who's unhappy with their assessment still can challenge that to this body sitting as the Board of Review. And if still the taxpayer is not happy with that number, can then challenge it to the tax assessor. So it's hard to come up with a certain adjusted millage rate while there's still so many other issues in flux, including the actual value of those properties that aren't going to be determined until sometime later this fall. So this is kind of the best shot at setting those adjusted millage rates to keep everything revenue neutral while we're still adjusting those assessments overall through the assessor's office, through the Board of Review, and through the tax commission.
Okay, I understand. So the adjusted millage rates, are those able to be adjusted downward so that they actually meet the revenue neutral goal? And when does that happen, or when is the cutoff that it's final and it is what it is?
It is able to happen legally. They can be rolled back by those bodies, but the numbers that are provided for the adjusted millage rate based on the reassessment are the numbers that are provided by the assessor's office.
So
based
the
on those
assessor,
reassessments.
so the assessor did provide you with an adjusted millage rate and said this is the millage to apply to meet your budgetary goal to match your revenue from last year.
Correct.
Okay, because he's telling the public that all he's responsible for is coming up with the assessment, and all these bodies are responsible for coming up with the millages.
Well,
I don't believe, I know it's a moving target. Boy, that's a big spread. If we're, you've seen some of the numbers where agencies are getting 30%, 40% more. People's taxpayers' tax bills are going up 30 or 40%.
and
So-
some agencies have decided to roll those forward, so they're actually collecting more than what would be a neutral collection, and those are not any agencies that we control. And you can see from our agenda, there are certain millages that we have put on the agenda for public hearing at the September 5th meeting to roll forward and some to roll back. So that's still a decision to be made by this body at the September 5th meeting.
So to me, it's not a matter of, well, my assessment is too high, it should be lowered. It's not the millage is too high, it should be lowered. It's a balancing act. You don't spend your budget based on a millage, you spend your budget based on dollars. The millage and the assessment are just a mechanism to calculate how to generate that revenue. So if you have a really high assessment, it doesn't matter, you adjust the millage lower, and that's what the law says is supposed to happen. Conversely, if in 4 years when everybody leaves and everyone sells their houses and property taxes plummet or property values plummet, then you can have the millage rate will go up, so you're still generating that same revenue. So there's a mechanism to do that. If people appeal their assessed values, I mean, they can do that, but it seems like rather than requiring people to do that, which will have maybe 2 or 3% of those appeals will be adjudicated, just have the correct millages so the revenue collected matches what state law requires them to do. And I don't know how it can move forward in direct opposition to state law when it says we're supposed to remain revenue neutral.
And I think there's a couple of other council members that want to address your comments as well.
Yes, so let's go ahead and do that. I was taking this one off. Okay. Arthur, you up?
Yes, sir. So just to clarify your question, are you basing it based off of the estimated taxes that are on the assessor's website right now?
Yes.
Okay, because those aren't 100% certain yet. We have not even set our millages yet. Our millages will be set, the few that we control, they will be set in September on the 5th at our next meeting. So I think that's just an estimate, that it's not an actual exact thing, because the assessor does not open the rolls until tomorrow, I believe is the first day of the open roll period. So I think you might see some updates on his site for that issue.
After tomorrow?
Tomorrow, starting tomorrow. Because when it publishes, it wasn't all tomorrow is the first day he's putting the rolls out for everybody to inspect. Some millages are not set. For example, the ones that the parish government controls. Ours are not set. Maybe the fire boards are already done, and the other taxing agencies like the school board, they're all set. But that's not 100% set in stone yet.
So, but by law, they should roll backwards so they do remain revenue neutral?
Well,
or are you saying they can decide
the default is revenue neutral. So he gives us a number and we use it, and we're like, okay, if we use this number, which is his estimation, because as Emily told us, it is a moving target. We have more houses than we did before. We have some people who are going to have exemptions. We have the the first responder exemption now that's going to be taking out a certain amount of revenue. So he gives us an estimate that we use when we do our budgets to determine whether or not each of those bodies, including us, wish to roll forward or roll even further back if each body wants to.
And I guess is that if they wish to do it or if they're required to do it?
Well, it depends on what the vote of that body is. So, like, for example, if Fire District 1 chooses they elect to what they're going to do with their millage, that's it. But by default, they should stay revenue neutral.
I mean, they've already voted to accept that millage already, because that was the millage that was given to them.
Right, and that was the best estimate probably the assessor had at the time.
Okay.
But like I said, the rolls are open now, starting tomorrow.
So is that an acceptable outcome? We're in defiance of the law by not remaining revenue neutral, but it was the best guess that we had?
I'm not the assessor, sir. So I mean, we have to trust the assessor's numbers. That's the person who is tasked with giving us that information.
Okay. It seems like a very convoluted way to do it, and it clearly failed this year. I've spoke with you in other occasions. This is devastating for our area.
I think we do have another councilman. Joe, you want to?
I was going to mention the same thing, that it's the numbers right now that are out there aren't accurate. The rolls aren't finished. I think you'll probably see a bigger adjustment because the values of property went up so much. But also remember, it's not house by house, it's gross, because we've seen some houses where the value did not go up and even the estimated tax amount went down. So it's not like your house may have doubled in value, But if my house went up 10%, so the adjustment's not individualized.
Yeah, I know there's variations, and some people will see higher increases and some less, and some might even see decreases. I understand that. I understand there's growth, and growth adds to the tax base, and that generates more tax revenue. But Fire District 1, if there's more growth, there's more homes and people have to protect, so obviously it does cause, need a bigger budget to handle that more,
Right,
more
like
service.
Fire District 1 did not choose to roll forward, right? So they remain neutral. So, but their option, because when you vote on a mill, you don't vote on a dollar amount, you vote for that mill. Their option at this time would be to roll forward. They do have that option, but they chose not to, and to remain revenue neutral.
Right, but, so they already voted on and accepted that adjusted millage that they were given. So now how do they go back and say, are they able to roll it back if they've already voted on it and accepted it?
They've already voted on the adjusted millage, that it is rolled back.
Right, but that adjusted millage was clearly wrong,
It very,
Yeah,
yes,
very
it very
inaccurate.
well could be.
which puts that whole issue in contrast with what the law requires.
But that's
So
why
do we
I
just
think the
disregard
numbers
it?
just aren't, I think what you're seeing now is not accurate. And I think once everything is refined, the
But-
numbers will be much more
Right,
conservative.
but what I'm saying, if they already voted on it, at this point, what recourse is there? It's already been voted on and accepted. So they can't change it, even if they want to go back and change it, there's no mechanism to change it.
But they've already rolled it back.
They've already rolled it
already-
back, but they're getting $3 million more in their budget than they had last year.
But that could be due to other reasons, like for additional construction that's been in the area, new homes, new developments, new
it's-
businesses.
Their millage is 34 point, I forget what it is. It should be, to remain revenue neutral, from someone that I spoke with, should be, if they were given 29 point whatever it was that I was told, that would remain revenue neutral. That would meet their budgetary goals.
But revenue neutral does not include new construction. It's only based on the pre-existing. But maybe, that is a good question. Can that still be adjusted? I don't know the answer to that. Would it-
Yes, taxing bodies can opt to take less taxes than they're allowed
But
to collect.
based on the assessments and the information out there, and I think it's a moving target like we were talking about earlier, would it still potentially be adjusted even lower? Would that number, that millage rate be lowered?
I'm not sure what the cutoff date is for that tax roll, but I believe so.
And that's the sticking point where you can say, well, the rolls are just opening now. They can still be moving, adjustments and things like that. But if it's already been voted on and accepted, is that really the case? Or have they already accepted the adjusted millage they were given, which in their opinion, which I've been told, was too high. It didn't need to be that high.
That's a good question. It's probably a question for the assessor.
Yeah.
But I do think grossly, all the millages it'll be less mills on the roll this year than it was last year.
And we do have two other councilmen that wanted to speak really quick. Mr. Corbin?
I guess I'm a touch confused. I'm sorry about that, but the adjusted millages that were provided, I don't know where this deviation is coming from, but the adjusted millages were provided is, my understanding of what it is a millage that if put in place after housing value, some group of houses have gone up in value, the millage that would be appropriate so that the net revenue that comes off of that group of houses had stayed flat. It doesn't include what goes on in the area of growth. It doesn't include those other houses. You're not netting every single penny that might be available. You're comparing apples to apples in that comparison. Now, the total revenue could potentially be higher in an area that's experiencing growth where there are new homes, because the total revenue now includes this adjusted millage applied to those homes that are not in that calculation. So it's two different questions, I think, and you got to look at it both ways. And I'd be happy to be corrected, but my understanding that's been explained to me several times is these adjusted millages would be the numbers that we would use. They're moved back from what they were last year. When they're moved back, that makes that a net amount of revenue coming off those same sets of properties. Is that clear?
Not entirely.
Okay.
Like for instance, in
no.
Lacombe, we had Folgers come online.
Yep.
So that just came on this year. So that would not be included in making the millage revenue neutral. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So that's a new add-on to the area.
yes, yep,
Okay.
I understand that. This
Like
is.
an orange.
I'm sorry?
Like the apples to apples, that would be an orange.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand that. This is from, their budgetary goal needs to be revenue neutral from last year, so they already had a budget set for last year. If their budget went up for, and not to pick on Fire District 1, if their budget went up by 12% year over year from last year to what it's looking at this year, are we saying that in Fire District 1's jurisdiction, growth went up 12%? I don't think anyone would argue that.
I don't know.
I don't think Fire District 1 would argue that. They don't want that money. Because they're getting calls from people complaining about why is Fire District 1 costing us this much money? And they say, we didn't ask for that. This is what our budget was. We were told to use this number.
Ms. O'Brien?
It's definitely not a perfect system, but remember, the assessor is required to use the appraised value at a certain period of time, excuse me. That's a state regulation. He does not have authority to change that. But we were talking last night, some of us at a meeting, to Jay Gallet, and we were pointing out some of the problems. So I know he's committed to take a look at that at the state level, because the state does control a lot of this. But in my district, we had a different situation also. I have one subdivision where one particular lot was sold at an extremely high price. So that affected 87 homes in one subdivision. Their value went up substantially, and you can go online and see that the value of the subdivisions around them are not near the same. So there are problems, but where you can get any type of recourse or help, there's no guarantees, but like the attorney said, somebody can file an appeal and come before us as Board of Review. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be happy, but you can still take it to the state afterwards if it doesn't work out. So you have two opportunities to be heard and possibly get some relief. But yes, at the state, some of the state reps are wanting to look at some components of this. So hopefully it'll change in the future.
I hope it does. It's very disappointing how it all transpired this year. It's going to be devastating for our area because people are already at a tipping point. We talked about insurance. We know flood insurance is high. We know inflation is high. We know people are struggling. And to add this on top of it, and the people that are going to leave are the tax base that we rely on, the people that do have the economic mobility and freedom to move somewhere else that say, you know, we're paying all this money to live here and it's not worth it. We're going to go somewhere else. There's people that don't have the ability to do that, and they're going to be stuck here. And it's going to bring down, it's devastating. And again, I am confused still about, I know you said the growth and you have to factor that in. I understand that, but it's still confusing how it does still seem to be in opposition to state law, which says it needs to be revenue neutral to collect the same amount, budgetary amount as was collected last year. I don't see anything about, well, when you factor in growth, it has to have this ratio, whatever. I don't see any of that specifically mentioned. I understand that point, but even when you do, if you did factor in that point, I still don't see that balances out with the amount of tax revenue that's being collected. I think the millages should be lower. I think that the agencies that are setting their millages were given incorrect millages. I don't know why. I think these numbers have been known for a long time, and I think they were given wrong millages, and I don't understand why, and the taxpayers are the ones that are footing the bill for it.
Sir,
Yes.
we have one councilman, Jeff.
I was just going to say, in the absence of like some facts showing us a specific case of what you're talking about, it's very hard for us to have hypotheses put out and us try to go address those. And that's really kind of, if I could finish, that's really the kind of conversation we're having right now. I think if your facts were documented, the assessor's the right place to go talk to them, or to go deal directly if it's Fire District 1 that you feel is telling you that, we really would have liked to have done less. I'd go talk to Fire District 1. That's really in their, that's a ball that's in their court. That's not in our court. They've got to go do it. And I understand the concept of revenue neutral, but we can go on for a long time and not get very far because we don't have specific facts of a case that's being put in front of us.
I understand.
Thank
I mean,
you.
the last thing I'll say, my facts are just the state law, and I would encourage the council to investigate further to figure out why this did not comply with the state law, what was wrong with it, if there's any recourse that can be done, and something put in place to make sure this does not happen again. That's all I'll say.
Okay, we have one more councilman.
Yes, sir. I think I misunderstood you, so I wanted just to clarify one thing. I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I think he's saying the numbers we were given were incorrect. The numbers we're basing our roll forwards and roll back are wrong. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the number that the assessor gave us is incorrect. And unfortunately, this is not something we have oversight over. We have oversight over individual assessments. If someone brings it to us through the assessor and the board of review process, then we can make a ruling. But unfortunately, it's only for one person, but across the board. So what you're saying is something that the assessment was done incorrectly, and that the number that the assessor's office provided each agency, including the parish council, the fire districts, was wrong. Is that what
Yes,
the claim you're making? Gotcha.
Yes.
So I think, number one, that's a issue locally for the assessor, but also probably for the auditor at the state level, because the assessor is kind of quasi a state. He's independently elected for the whole parish, but then he's separate from the parish. We cannot overrule him. We can overrule his individual assessments, but not him in general, and we do not govern over him.
Yeah, and I understand there's only a few different agencies that you're in control of the millages, and just like another independent body that has to set their own millage. So I understand that, but just on behalf of your constituents and taxpayers, I would encourage you to take up this issue some way to figure out where I can't be convinced that this isn't a failure in how it was carried out. So some way to either rectify it or at least prevent it from happening again. Because this is, to me, it's a clear indication the system broke in this process. So, and that's all I'll say.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you coming. Thank you. Okay, at this time, excuse me, we need a motion and a second to refer ordinance calendar number 7621 AA to the full council. I do need a motion. Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Good. Moving on. I think the next one that was pulled was Resolution C-6996. Councilman Laughlin, you want to turn your, there you go. You got
Yes,
it?
sir. I've spoken to the City of Slidell zoning commissioner, the director of zoning. This is no longer needed, so I'm going to make a motion to pull this from the agenda at the regular meeting.
Thank you, sir. Okay, at this time,
Apparently I stole Mr. Weiner's thunder.
We still need a motion to move that to the full council.
that's what I was going to do. Yeah. Okay, so at this time, again, we need a motion and a second to refer resolution number C-6996 to the full council. I do need a motion, please. Arthur? Ms. O'Brien, second, please. All in favor? Any nays? Thank you. And our last one, we have a card. That was resolution number 7003, Mr. Colin Sims. And we have a 3-minute time limit. Thanks.
I'm not sure. I guess I'll address it ahead of it actually being spoken out loud. My understanding, there's a resolution pending to further fund litigation against the district attorney's office over our budget, and to determine, I'm assuming, if you can give us less money based upon determining what your mandated obligations are to fund the DA's office. As it stands right now, the DA's office pretty much gets by on the money you fund us because of the grant monies we've sought that are restricted for certain purposes. I'm only able to offset some of the deficits now because of those funds and because of asset forfeiture efforts made by our office seizing large quantities of cash from drug dealers. I can't plan a budget around doing that, right? So I'm having to offset what is already an underfunded organization. For this year, it'll be $300 and something thousand with not enough reoccurring funding to fund our organization that I offset with grants and asset forfeiture. For next year, it'll be a difference to our general surplus of about $570,000. Now, with grants and whatnot, I can do things to not have that be the full impact, but over time, I won't be able to do that, and that'll be the impact if you do not take any funding away from our office, if our insurance rates do not increase at all, and other obligations do not go north. That's the impact right now, negative $570 a year, if I don't use grant funds to offset it. I can do some of that right now, but it's a dance. There's a discussion that not you guys as a council, but parish government is considering cutting us by maybe 30%. You cut this organization by any percentage, I start firing people. You start jeopardizing public safety immediately. If you cut it to the amount of money that's being discussed, I'm not saying that you guys are as you sit here, but if that happens, because you're suing and spending, let's see, so far $840,000 to be in litigation with us, the judges, and other people of taxpayer money to determine if you can give us a lesser amount of money by law. If you're successful in doing that, the judges lay people off and we lay people off. So I ask you, as you sit here before you send another dollar over to parish government to continue these lawsuits, why do you want to pay for a judicial determination if you can give us less money, if you conclude, because I think all of you agree, I've been exceptionally transparent. I've sat down with all of you multiple times and laid out everything we're funding and what we want to fund. Why would you fund us less and pay money to figure that out if that's not your intention? If it's not, then don't send any more money over, because guess what? Every time y'all send money over, I got to take money away from public safety and prosecution to defend it. So 100,000 goes over here, I got to spend another 100 grand to defend it. So you're taking money away from the criminal justice system and the DA's office, every time you send more money over here to litigate. So far, we've spent 300,000, the parish has spent 430, the judges have spent 110. That's $840,000. I don't think we want to keep doing that. Thank you for my time. I've gone over.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Okay. So at this time, I would need a motion and a second to refer resolution number 7003 to the full council. I need a motion, please. Second. Mr. Phillips. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Let's see. At this time, Mr. Daniel Hill would like to come up to the podium with a presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, members of the council. I guess this is a brief presentation. It's not going to take a long time. I just wanted to run you through step by step what we do in the Department of Engineering is concerned drainage complaints or requests that come into the department. Just a general background. We have a small group of staff members in the Department of Engineering that are dedicated to sorting out drainage issues in this parish. We have 2 drainage inspectors, a drainage technician, an engineer level 3, and code enforcement, dedicated code enforcement officer, specifically to work on drainage items. You could look at a demand. Some days we might not get any issues coming to the office. Heavy rain event happens, 20, 30 come in a single day. So I bear your forgiveness. When the rain happens, we get slightly overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that's coming into the office. For example, last year we got 382 log drainage items in to staff. If you recall, last year we were in a drought, so we didn't receive much rainfall for a good portion of the year. It was kind of a saving grace. This year we're already up to 371, and I got 3 months left in the year to surpass that number. And again, processing time varies greatly depending on how these items come in. Some of them are as simple as can be, and then other of them are very complex situations that deserve a lot of more time and attention. So I say step one, when something comes in to the office, there's usually three mechanisms coming into the office. It's email requests. It goes out to the whole drainage group to work on. Drainage complaints at STPG-TV.org. So that gets out to our whole drainage group. It gets logged in that way. You can also call engineering department directly at 985-898-2552, and staff can put it in for you. And we also have an online form that can be filled out by residents. More information, the better, always. We get, anonymous complaints. The corner at Oak Street is flooding without detail. I think there's like 5 Oak Streets in St. Tammany Parish, so it doesn't give staff a bunch to go by, so we always request as much detail as possible when somebody's putting one of these requests in. We log the drainage complaints in a database. Just as an example, this is my database for this year of all drainage complaints received. This is how many we're working on at the moment, so I guess you can compare size of these 2 stacks of paper. We've cleared out a good bit this year, but it is something we log every one of them in to keep a record, just to make sure we're not revisiting items that have already been cleared through our processes. So we log everything in. We do an initial review. I guess this is mostly where my staff would have interaction with council members on. We always like to have a phone call. We can talk so we don't waste our time looking at something that was the incorrect issue or wasn't explained in the right way. If we can meet a resident out or a council member out on site to sort through it, it always works for a better result in the end. We perform site inspections, a preliminary determination of which direction a complaint might go. Sometimes a complaint will come in and it's obviously a code enforcement issue from the way the complaint's described, or a neighbor dispute, or an actual capital issue. We can usually determine, if enough information is provided, which direction it will go. And then we do our general legal, real estate, and code review information from there. That's where you might see a pause on it. We're working behind the scenes on it, determining if servitudes are in place, if it's public land, private land. There's a lot that goes into it, figuring out whose responsibilities, or if we even have legal right to address it. And again, the engineering department doesn't resolve all of these issues. We rely on other departments in St. Tammany Parish to do it as well. So when in that case, we make the determination of which direction it needs to go. For the engineering department, you look on our end, it's capital projects. Does this issue, if we're receiving multiple complaints from one subdivision, does it need to be developed into a capital project to address an overarching problem? That's usually one of the main ones for us. I think we have a couple items on this agenda that were developed out of drainage complaints received into the department. On the development end, my development group mainly deals with commercial permit reviews and all the subdivisions that are approved through. So if there's issues that come on there, we'll send out our subdivision inspector to look at it, to document it. Again, for permit violations, we'll work with the permits department, since they're the permitting authority in the parish. The ones that I guess you'd say, shuttle off to other departments to deal with. Public Works is one of them. I always say Public Works is the simplest request. That's a work order in. Y'all are familiar with the process. Sometimes a resident might not be clear that that's the direction they need to go, so we get the work order in for them to get a section of ditch cleaned or a culvert blown out. So permits and inspections. Permits and inspections department, I always say, if there's a drainage item that comes into us and there's a placard with a permit number on the front, that's being actively managed through the permits department. So we'll notify them of the issue for a corrective measure when that happens. And then planning code enforcement, like I said, initially we have a code enforcement that's dedicated to us. So he's working with all the illegal fill placement complaints against critical drainage ordinances. You know, neighbors blocking up by constructing something in their yard they weren't not permitted to do. And many of those progressed to code enforcement cases. And then simply to close it out, we'll follow up with each department, make sure it's being logged in their system. For Public Works, for example, like a work order is initiated in Public Works. We do have some unaddressed items. If you ever hear me say we'll put you on a rainy day list, drainage is very easy to sort out when it's in the middle of a thunderstorm and you can see which direction everything's going. So if it's not obvious to us on a nice dry day what's going on, I'll say we'll throw this on a rainy day list, and staff will scramble and try to get out to all of the spots they can on a rainy day. And then items with no action taken, we end up looking at it. It's solely private property. My neighbor does this and I don't like it. There's no direct code in violation. We inform everybody the issue. Those don't always go over well, but we try to keep that going. And then, again, I didn't have a lot for y'all, so quick again, let everybody know this information. I know your council staff and everybody gets us through this and responds in this manner. It helps us to funnel it through us. The Department of Technology is working on something a little bit more interactive with a mapping system for our drainage complaints so that we can see it's a little more interactive when somebody would put it in online. So we're hoping that comes online soon. And then I got to give a thank you to my staff members that work on this. I always say, for all my department members, they're the most complained on and the most thankful that residents get. It's very equally balanced. And it's just the nature of the work. I mean, sometimes we can't solve everybody's problem. Sometimes we're the savior of the situation. So, like I say, it runs equal. So as long as that scale's staying balanced, I'm content with it. And again, I wanted to thank them while I'm up here for the job that they do. And,
I have a quick question, and I
Sure.
know we have another councilman that does a couple. How often do you get like something going to this, the email, the drainage complaints email, that really becomes a public works issue, like a cleaning of the ditch? Because I know we get like those all the time.
I guess good, if it's somebody that knows what's going on and understands it, usually it's just applied for a work order directly. Mm-hmm. We have it on the form online. We try to say, if this is for cleaning a ditch, please just go ahead and enter a work order request instead. And I know council staff understands that if it's a maintenance item. So I'd say that's, not as common as other one. The majority of them are going to be a legal fill placement, those sorts of items.
Big ones. Okay, thank you. We have Mr. Kugel.
Daniel, thank you. As I'm sure you can guess, one of the main interests of my constituents is always drainage, especially when for a district such as my own that so much is outside of city limits, and really it's fully dependent on the parish to address drainage issues. This presentation is very good. One thing, if I don't know if there's a way to put a web version online so that we can share it with constituents, or basically a web version of the PowerPoint. Or just email it.
Yeah,
email us the electronic version.
Yeah,
We'll figure
we
it out.
can.
Yeah, just right. No, I meant to share with. I wanted an electronic version to share with constituents, just so they understand the process as well.
Yep.
Like I said, one of my biggest issues is always people interested in drainage issues, but you guys are. I think it's come up before, like overwhelmed a lot of times. What, as a council, do you have any reasonable? That we can do to make you be able to do your job better, which ultimately serves our constituents.
I think from a staffing standpoint, I'm fine until that bad weather event happens, and then again it's a scramble. But that's not something I would account for with staffing, additional staffing. So I think we have a good group of people that are handling it. There are a few issues that we have repeat items on it. I know. We had talked with Councilman Impastato about possibly resolving some of the issues we have on private property. You say you'll have a section of drainage that's in great condition, it's a parish maintained lateral. We have the rights to get in and to maintain it. Then all of a sudden it's private ownership, and then it comes back to parish again. So when you start, it's not necessarily they've constructed something on private property that's impeding, it's the lack of maintenance on it, and we don't really have an ordinance that addresses that.
Okay.
And I know we've met to discuss the possibility of giving some ordinance support on our
Okay.
end. So it's really just those sorts of things, and if we become aware that something's a repeat issue over and over again, that's when we'll bring it to the table to discuss.
Thanks.
Mr. Corbin?
You know, I got a couple of questions. One is, I recognize the three options on your conclusion chart for how people can communicate to you. Is there, for example, a correctly completed form or an adequately cleaned form as an example on the website? I don't know, I haven't looked, so I'm not.
The website's, I guess, the all right one. It requires some information to be placed in it. You know, again, it can go from a resident saying, place a phone number in. It could be a mysterious phone number that doesn't actually have the information. Some people are very guarded when they place information. They don't want to be the snitch or the person that's saying something that their neighbor's doing is wrong. In general, I think it's better to receive the incorrect information and us to try to hunt it down and sort through it than cut it off altogether.
Right, no, what I'm asking is, do you have an example of a form that's completed out adequately?
I can
that
get you
has
one.
all the information, and do you have that on your website or that's available so people know?
This is an example how to fill it out.
Just a second. When I call you, or when I send you a drainage complaint, or when I actually fill out the form, this is all the information we need and we want. And I think that if you don't have that, that might be helpful.
thank you for those
is to
suggestions.
Give
We'll
them,
get it
give them
on.
that baseline. Secondly, do you have data points embedded in this process that you're going to be able to report back on over time about transition time between step 1, step 2 to step 3, step 3 to step 4, so we can watch the productivity and efficiency of your organization grow over time?
So I guess my only issue with it is that's such varied items across it, whether it's a drainage item, if we were to look at it strictly as drainage complaints coming in, a request that comes into the office that is Public Works needs to clear out a ditch is resolved same day. Whereas overarching subdivision issue that's going to play out over a year plus longer due to the work that's needed to do it. I understand getting metrics, but what we have now does not track well.
Okay. So, but for example, we had, it wasn't in your process, we did something historically at someplace that I've worked before, and we had a triage step to immediately bucket into different categories, because the expectation for something that's immediately going to go to Jay Watson's team is much, much shorter than one that's going to require you to go do a project. And so I don't know if you have thought about a triage step right at the front, because then you're basically on 3 different paths, or 4, or whatever your number is, and you can look at the relative performance in those different paths, as opposed to saying, well, one that's got to go do everything that you just talked about took so much longer than this other one. Well, that's really not relevant data. So I'd be happy to talk with you offline and some more about it, but I think that in the long run, the more we can start showing people that, you know, that these are how our team's performing, and if you're going to ask about something like this is why it takes so long, that puts us in a defensible position.
Well, I appreciate
Okay?
it, yes.
Thanks.
Oh. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much. Okay, at this time, I will need a motion to adjourn, please. Thank you.